Welcome to the Psychotherapy Central podcast, where we discuss love, attachment, and healing from trauma. A place where you can gain the knowledge, tools, and wisdom to help you build secure, flourishing relationships. I'm your host, clinical psychotherapist and couples therapist, Jennifer Nurick. Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of Psychotherapy Central, understanding and healing protest behaviors through an IFS lens. Today, we're diving into protest behaviors, what they are, how they develop, and how they impact adult relationships. Most importantly, we'll explore these behaviors through the lens of internal family systems, or IFS for short, and how this approach can help you address and heal them. So if you've ever found yourself texting your partner repeatedly, withdrawing to get their attention, or starting arguments over small issues, this episode is for you. So welcome. I'm sitting in I call it the healing room in Sydney. It's for me, the focal of our home. We've been having the most incredible summer here in Sydney, day after day. It's now early January, since mid-November. Just the most beautiful sunshine. Just such a pleasure seeing everybody out and enjoying themselves. So wherever you are in the world, hello, and I hope you're staying warm for those of you in the States and in the UK. So let's jump in. What are protest behaviors? Protest behaviors are reactions that arise when we feel disconnected or emotionally unsafe in a relationship. In essence, they're attempts to re-establish a sense of connection, often driven by fear or insecurity. So some common examples include excessive texting or calling when your partner is unavailable. So they don't respond, and there is this compulsion to keep calling or texting. Withdrawing or giving your partner the silent treatment to see if your partner will pursue you. So it's kind of a bit of a game, but it's not coming from a place of conscious awareness. It's coming from more of a compulsive, exiled, wounded place, which we'll talk more about in a moment. Starting arguments over seemingly minor issues, which are in essence masking deeper fears of abandonment. These behaviors, as I said, are usually not premeditated. They're more like gut reactions or automatic responses that feel uncontrollable in the moment. And while they might bring temporary relief or attention, they often strain the relationship over time. And if you've ever felt yourself doing these behaviors, you've probably noticed that it's had exactly the opposite impact to the one that you're really wanting, which is more closeness. It often creates more distance. So how do these protest behaviors develop? So to understand protest behaviors, we need to look back at their roots in early attachment experiences. And when we say attachment experiences, we're talking about relational experiences, often with primary caregiver. So if you grew up in an environment where your emotional needs were consistently met, you might have developed what's called an insecure attachment style. This is about 50% of the population. For example, if caregivers were unpredictable, so they're sometimes loving and attentive, but they're sometimes unavailable, you might have learned to amplify your need for connection to ensure that your needs are met. If expressing emotions was dismissed or punished, you might have developed strategies to get attention indirectly, like withdrawing or acting out. Now, these behaviors were adaptive in childhood, and what that means is they helped you survive. They helped you get your needs met in different ways, especially in environments that felt uncertain or unsafe. However, in adult relationships, these same strategies often backfire. They create tension and, like I said before, ultimately disconnection. What is the impact on current relationships? In adult relationships, protest behaviors often surface when a partner's actions trigger old wounds of abandonment or rejection. For example, if your partner doesn't respond to messages quickly enough, it might feel like a repeat of being ignored as a child. That psychological distance of them not responding can feel like the psychological distance that you experienced with a parent in childhood, or maybe the actual absence of a parent. A disagreement might activate deep fears of being left or unloved. So although on the surface you might think, oh, it's just a conflict, it's not a big deal, it's not about the conflict, it's about the emotional distance that happens and how our younger parts respond to that sense of emotional distance. So these behaviors can ultimately push our partner away, creating the very disconnection that you fear. Can lead to misunderstandings where your partner interprets your actions as controlling, dramatic, or manipulative. And it can prevent open communication about your deeper needs and fears. So recognizing how these patterns play out is the first step towards breaking the cycle. Protest behaviors through an IFS lens. IFS is the abbreviation of internal family systems. And that it's a method of psychotherapy. It's a very powerful method. It's one of my favorite ways of working, and I feel it really emerges out of transactional analysis, which is that inner child, inner adult, inner parent model. So that parts model that's been around for quite a long time and has really been built on by Richard Schwartz. Great book is No Bad Parts if you're curious. And in this podcast, episode 5 to 13, but especially episode 5, What is IFS? Really unpack and explain the IFS model. Protest behaviors often stem from parts of you that feel scared or vulnerable. In IFS, we call these parts exiles because they've often been pushed away and hidden from the rest of the system. These parts learned old strategies to protect you and get your needs met. For example, a panicked part might push you to send and repeatedly message, desperately seeking reassurance. A defensive part might withdraw or give the silent treatment, trying to avoid further hurt. These parts aren't bad or defective or broken. They're simply doing what they know how. They're doing their best based on what they've learned in the past. However, these strategies may no longer serve you in the present. So Jen, how do we heal protest behaviors using IFS? Healing protest behaviors involves building a compassionate relationship with these parts of yourself. And here's how you can start. First is awareness. Beginning by noticing when protest behaviors show up, pausing and asking yourself, what part of me is reacting right now? Secondly is getting curious. Let's get curious about the part that's driving the behavior. This is part of therapy that I love, where we identify a part and then we get really curious about why it's doing what it's doing. And we ask questions like, what is this part of me afraid of? What does this part need from me? And we're using compassion through this whole modality. IFS is a very compassion, curiosity-led modality. So we approach these parts that are often quite frightened inside of us with an infinite amount of kindness. We remind them that their feelings are valid, that we understand that they're trying to help, even if their methods might be less than ideal in one way or another, and not lead to the outcome that we're looking for. In IFS, there's this concept of self-leadership, where the goal is to be what we call self-led. So it's this core self that is calm and compassionate and curious that takes the lead. And self can start to reassure these parts that you're capable of handling relationships in healthier ways. When we're more self-led and the exiles are feeling safer, being held by that self-energy, more integrated through the healing process of IFS, we can start to practice new responses. So instead of acting on impulse to the text repeatedly, we can take a deep breath and we can really soothe and hold that part that is feeling anxious, that triggered part that is holding that wound. Instead of withdrawing, we can express our feelings more directly, which might sound like, I'm feeling really scared and I need some reassurance. Ultimately, there is no better way to do IFS, I feel, than with a trained IFS therapist and getting some support. Whenever there is attachment wounding, it is relational wounding. And so when you are sitting with a therapist, whether it's online, and my practice is entirely online, and I find that that is still a very, very powerful way to work, or in person, working with another person, with another energetic system, another nervous system, there is this very powerful healing and reparative experience that can happen. And together with your therapist, you can learn how to hold these exiles, these more vulnerable parts, take them through a very profound healing process and help them reintegrate. And that model is a constraint release model. So once the constraints of the past, which could be the unprocessed trauma, the tension, the fear, the panic that is held at that age, time, place, space, is given a new experience, is aired, is felt, is held in a relational space, it can then choose something else it would like to be doing in the system. And often when we ask a part, what would you like to do now you're not holding all of that? The part will spontaneously say something magical like, I would just want to rest, or I just want to create, or I just want to act and play around and be messy. Yep, so it's this, once a constraint is released, all this life force returns into the system. And that's when you can find that over time, things like depression can start to shift because this new vitality and life force is coming back into the system. So in conclusion, protest behaviors are your nervous system, your system's way of saying, I need to feel safe and connected. They are not your fault and they don't define you. I would love you to really remember that. By understanding these behaviors through an IFS lens, you can approach them with compassion and begin to heal the underlying fears that trigger them, that drive them. We've covered a lot today. We've explored protest behaviors in relationships. We've explained and explored their roots in childhood attachment patterns and their impact on adult dynamics. Using an IFS lens, we've reviewed some compassionate strategies for understanding, soothing, and ultimately healing and reintegrating the parts driving these behaviors so that we can have healthier connections. We can be less triggered in our interpersonal relationships. So if you're ready to explore this further, my book, Heal Your Anxious Attachment, provides practical tools and over 20 meditations and practices to support your journey. It's available at all major book retailers. You can find more resources in the highlight on my Instagram bio labeled attachment. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please give a 5-star rating. It really helps. Thank you for listening. And remember that healing takes time and every step you take matters. and congratulate it. Lots of love, Jen. Thank you for joining me on this episode. If you want to learn more about all things love, attachment and trauma, I'd love to connect with you on Instagram at psychotherapy.central or visit my website at psychotherapycentral.health. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave a review and a 5-star rating. Your support means a lot, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.